Emmanuelle is here, the Wolfman's a complete unknown, there's a presence in Section 31, and the Brutalist is a flight risk. I'm Van Connor.
And I'm Adam Ball, and this is Off Screen, your 7-day guide to everything movies.
Boom.
Groovy.
Well, hello and welcome back to Off Screen. We have got a jam-packed show today. Probably the busiest we've been for quite a while, actually. We've got 8 movies to look at. Very, very quickly before we start, any movie gods, anything you want to talk about? Because I know we're in a bit of a rush time-wise.
Obviously we record this on the Thursday, this goes out on the Friday. The Oscar nominations were today. And let's just say all of those bribes from the Wicked team have evidently paid off. Because I refuse to believe that many voters watched Wicked, saw Ariana Grande and thought, what a thespian. We must award her immediately. Come on. Although my boys got their nominations. Sebastian Stan, Jeremy Strong for The Apprentice. Best actor and best supporting actor for the pair. I'm elated. I'm so happy. I love that movie. I'm hoping people will now start to pay more attention to that film. So if you've not seen it, by the way, The Apprentice, the Donald Trump origin story.
Yes.
Really, really good movie. And Sebastian Stan and Jeremy Strong are both terrific in it. So watch that, definitely.
Well, you said it would happen, and it has. You've predicted the future, just like The Simpsons. All right, so let's crack straight on. Tom Hanks' new movie, Here. I don't really know a lot about this one.
So this is based on a graphic novel, of all things, and there's been several versions of it over the years. There have been short films and attempts to make films out of it. This one comes to us from Robert Zemeckis of, Back to the Future fame. Robert Zemeckis,
yes.
Who framed Roger Rabbit, and of course, most notably for this, Forrest Gump, because this actually reunites Forrest and Jenny. So you get Tom Hanks and Robin Wright back together here. Now, the basic premise of this, now bear in mind, it's Robert Zemeckis doing it. Robert Zemeckis has always been a very experimental filmmaker, loves playing with the medium, had that weird phase in the 2000s where he kept making like really awful CG animated, what were trying to be like live action looking CG things like Beowulf and Polar Express. Here, his latest experiment is to adapt this story, which effectively takes place from one physical spot. The camera doesn't move. Okay, so the camera is planted in one spot at the dawn of time, and it stays there. And we get told, a non-linear story. It's told sort of out of sequence, but the camera always stays in the same fixed spot, in the same location.
Does it turn?
So you will see. No, it doesn't turn.
Oh.
It literally stays in the same physical position. So at one point, when it starts out, you're looking at dinosaurs and a certain set of trees. And then those trees are still there, but the dinosaurs have been wiped out, and you've got the indigenous peoples of North America there as well. It's a subtitle film. Then it cuts to, the colonial period and George Washington and people like that when they're building their houses. And then you get, people coming home from World War II and buying their first home, which has now been built in front of that exact spot, and so on and so forth. And of course, Tom Hanks is part of this ensemble cast, which also includes, for instance, Paul Bettany and Kelly Riley. There is de-aging technology used as well. I can say it's just the story of, it's a bunch of stories that just all take place in this one physical location. In other words, right here. So I've got a clip for you. This is Paul Bettany when he's sort of younger. He's a younger family man. He has just come back from, I think, World War II. And he is living with basically the trauma and the PTSD that this has left with him. This is his son asking about, what he did in the war.
That's a hell of a battle you got going there. Who's winning?
The Americans just shot all the crowds.
Good.
Did you ever shoot anybody?
Come again?
In the war. Did you shoot anybody?
It's hard to know. Everything happens so fast, it's just a blur. You never really see the enemy, just the flash of a helmet. Guy next to me, Carl Bolton, from Wesley, Ohio. He had 2 different color eyes, one brown, one blue. Two-tone. Called him Two-Tone. Saw him get his jaw blown off.
I'm sure the kid in this is an English actor.
I don't actually know offhand, but the kid is, of course, young Tom Hanks.
Yes,
So the kid is obviously going to grow up to be Tom Hanks. We get to see Tom Hanks when he's 17, in this, because they've used CG to de-age him. It's quite well done as well. Weirdly, Robin Wright doesn't de-age quite as well as Tom Hanks, strangely. You would have thought that would be the other way around. And so, of course, they have to age up Paul Bettany and age down Tom Hanks. So it's kind of a weird... Yeah, there's some fun to be had here. And I actually quite liked it. It has gotten some awful reviews from other critics. Notably, Kermode, I know, was not a big fan. I think his quote on it was that it made Forrest Gump look like Apocalypse Now, which I think is unfair. I think it's a good Sunday afternoon film. It's a nice, tight and tidy Sunday afternoon familial drama. It's rated quite low. I think it's only a 12A. So it kind of works as a Sunday afternoon, gather the family round kind of a drama. I would imagine, obviously, this has been conceived with the idea of, get me a Best Picture nomination. No, you won't, pal. No, you won't. It ain't that good. But I like the gimmick. I think it quite works. And as a representation of the graphic novel, because I've seen a little bit of the graphic novel here and there, I think it works very well. But as I say, it's not going to blow everyone away, but as an experiment, I think it's quite an interesting one, quite a well-acted one, and quite a decently compelling one.
Well, you can make your mind up yourself because it's in cinemas from today. Right, we are going to move on to Emmanuelle, which is billed as a steamy romance.
Do you know about Emmanuelle? Do you know the legacy of Emmanuelle?
No, I know absolutely nothing about Emmanuelle.
Strap on in, son. Oh, I got you on this one. Okay, so 1974. Emmanuelle, adaptation of a series of French novels, okay? They don't really have a plot, to be honest. They're just random dramas that follow this character called Emmanuelle, originally played by, I think, Sylvia Christel in 1974. And the story is basically just, she's a very horny woman. She just travels the world and has a lot of sex. That is the plot.
Why not?
Emmanuelle. Like, there's Emmanuelle Goes to Tokyo. There's a movie that's Emmanuelle in Space from 1994. I remember that one quite. That's my personal favourite, actually, is Emmanuelle in Space.
What, does she have sex in space?
Well, actually, no. The title is quite deceptive. Aliens come to Earth and she teaches them about human but that's beside the point anyway. Right? They have always been. The first one was kind of a highbrow art film, but it was made at the dawn of cinematic erotica, because early 70s, and obviously they got increasingly trashy very quickly. Like, I think there's 4 of the original Emmanuelles, and there's a bunch of spin-offs. Like, there must be a dozen or so Emmanuelle movies by now, and there's been attempts to do it again and again over the years. This is an attempt to actually class it up and make it with 21st century production values and give it some of that perfume ad cinematic sheen. You know what I mean? So it stars Naomi Merlon. I think it's Naomi Merlon. Yeah, Naomi Merlon. She's our new Emmanuelle for 2025. The big name in the cast really is Naomi Watts, who's not really got a huge role. But the idea here is that our new Emmanuelle is effectively a quality control inspector for like an Uber 5-star series of hotels. And she has been sent to Hong Kong to check out and vet one of their flagship ones that she's not been to before. It's run by Naomi Watts. She shows up to inspect the hotel, and of course, as always happens in an Emmanuelle movie, she quickly finds herself being drawn into all the seedy goings on that are taking place, behind the scenes and in this darker underbelly beneath the veneer of this very classy hotel, which looks a lot like the hotel my partner works at. Not gonna lie. I have been calling it hotel porn. Now, I have to stress that when I say that, I don't mean it's porn set in a hotel. I mean, they go out of their way to make this hotel look as sexy as human. I want to stay in this hotel. Oh, it's gorgeous. But that's beside the point. The real porn here is what Emmanuelle's up to, so have a listen.
What exactly are you looking for?
Only 2 types of guests frequent luxury hotels. Those on the prowl, and those on the run.
Do you get pleasure? Why wouldn't I? What can you tell me about him?
You seem to be a stickler for rules, but you don't always follow them, do you?
Is it a game?
Why should I answer?
Because I can't stop thinking about you.
Do you know the first thing I thought of when you played that clip? The music sounds like it's from Squid Games.
It does a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does sound very Squid Game-ish, doesn't it? Yeah. Right, so obviously, first and foremost, I have to say, academically, this is the best one of these movies in the 51 years since the original.
Wow.
Like, hands... Because it's the only one that's been made as, like, an actual film. Usually they're made as sort of direct-to-DVD or direct-to-video smut. For, like... Well, they basically were softcore porn. But this has been made as an actual film. And made for an audience that, funnily enough, because this obviously dropped last week, the week before that was the release of Baby Girl. So, I mean, I was celebrating the release of this when I saw it. I was like, yes, cinematic smut is back, baby. You know, and I'm down for that. I mean, Challengers kind of counts from last year as well. Naomi Millan, I think, actually gives it quite a well-judged performance, what this needs to be, because she has that stoicism, that very kind of detached... that kind of detached persona that every version of Emmanuelle needs to have. Notably, Krista Allen, my personal favourite of the Emmanuelle actresses, did not have this. And she starred in my favourite ones, I say, Emmanuelle in Space from 1994. You have got a couple of faces you'll recognise in there. Will Sharp, in particular, Jamie Campbell Bowers, who was in the Sweeney Todd, the Johnny Depp Sweeney Todd in 2007.
Oh yeah,
as the sort of young protege, he's in there as well. And there are some hot scenes. There's not particularly any good dramatic scenes, but again, I have to imagine anyone showing up to an Emmanuelle movie who knows what an Emmanuelle movie is, damn sure ain't there for the plot. And let's just say this movie will be huge in Asia and the Middle East. Like going by where I have seen Emmanuelle fandom over the years, like around the world, I can tell you anecdotally, this is going to be huge in Asia and the Middle East, because the Emmanuelle movies always were, and this one is like a proper film to boot. So, you know, fair play to it. You know what you're getting, and if you don't, let's just call it cinematic smut without much of a plot.
Well, you can watch Emmanuelle. It's already out in cinemas, so go and check it out if you have been drawn to it from Van's review. Right, still to come. Loads, actually. In fact, 6 more. We've got Wolfman, we've got Presence, we've got Star Trek Section 31, and there's more than that, but you're going to have to stay there to find out what else. We'll be back in a minute. Hello and welcome back to Off Screen. We've got so many movies to go through. Let's dive straight into my next one with Van. So, if you're a Bob Dylan fan, this one hopefully is for you. It's called A Complete Unknown, and well, it's a biography essentially, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing, because I thought biopic. I thought this was going to be the Bob Dylan biopic. It's not really. It's a chronicle of a fixed period, a very specific period in Bob Dylan's life, in the same way that Michael Mann did with Muhammad Ali. Because I think Ali only takes place over 2 years, and it's the period that, you know, Muhammad Ali dealt with his legal troubles, the Nation of Islam, and his relationship with Malcolm X, etc. This is kind of a similar thing where this takes place over about 5 years and deals with Bob Dylan's rise to prominence as a folk musician in the early 60s. And then the folk community basically turning on him when he decides, do you know what, I'm gonna break with tradition and give these newfangled electric instruments a go. Giving birth to, of course, the famous album Dylan Goes Electric at the Newport Folk Festival in 1965, I believe. It is also, in a sense, sort of a spiritual sequel to Walk the Line, which is written and directed by the same man. So James Mangold, you know, Wolverine, the second Wolverine one, The Wolverine, and Logan and Ford v Ferrari director James Mangold actually did the most recent Indiana Jones. Did the fourth Indiana Jones movie. And he has co-written and then directed this as well. Johnny Cash appears in it as a character as well. So he is one of several sort of mentor figures to our young Bob Dylan, who's played for the screen by Timothée Chalamet, who has, let's be honest, has got the mumbling down like brilliantly, because that's the kind of thing you need with Bob Dylan, like, can I do the mumbling? He's got the mumbling and he's got the musical chops, and that's an important thing, because before we play the clip, it's worth noting everybody in the movie is performing, like, for real. Like, it's not, we're going to fake the guitar and lip sync and then we'll go into the studio afterwards and we'll run it through auto-tune and just add it onto the recording. No, they are performing in the scene. Edward Norton is sitting down playing that banjo and singing. And Timothée Chalamet is getting on stage at the end of this and singing like a Rolling Stone, as the title very cleverly suggests. I've got a clip for you. This is Bob Dylan showing up to a cocktail party, and, well, 3 guesses what the one request everyone makes of Bob Dylan is when he shows up to a cocktail party.
Hey, Pete.
Hey.
How you doing?
Good.
Nice
Great to see you.
Toshi. How you doing? Hey, me around the world in 80 days, huh?
It's a magic carpet ride. Just full of wonder. Full of wonder.
This is Becca, by the way.
Nice to meet you. This is my wife, Toshi.
Nice to meet you. I absolutely love your music. I'm such a big fan, Mr. Seeger.
Pete. Harold is putting the lean on you there? Trying to get you to play?
Yeah, a little bit.
All right, well, don't hold it against him. It's for a good cause. Want to use this beauty?
You always keep it handy, don't you? He's like a gunfighter with a 6-gun, always keeping it close. Oh, the time will come up when the winds will stop and the breeze will cease to be breathing.
Oh, brilliant. I'm just singing along there and have a little tap along.
Yeah, you get really drawn in. And that's actually the brilliance of the movie. So the movie's not a great story about Bob Dylan, because you don't really get much about Bob Dylan as a man, as a person. It's the story of what he did. It's the story of his how he turned that community against him, and then of course won the world over when he went electric and gave us bangers like a Rolling Stone. And as such, it's what you would describe as a vibes movie. This is a term that we've come up with in recent years to describe movies that aren't so much about plot, so much as they are the feeling of the movie, the vibe of it. And if ever there was a subject that aptly fits that so perfectly fits that, Bob Dylan would be it, to be honest, because, Bob Dylan's I think he's the only person ever to win the Nobel Prize for Literature for songwriting. Like, he wrote songs and then won... it was Nobel Prize for Poetry, wasn't it? It was Nobel Prize for Poetry.
Wow.
And it was his song lyrics, and he won the poetry Nobel for it. And yeah, as such, that works perfectly. Chalamet is great in it. I would argue that we're not seeing him pushed any further than we've ever really seen him before. Obviously, the musical side is something quite new for him. But in terms of the performance, not really anything we haven't seen of Chalamet outside of this, with added mumbling. The MVP, though, is Edward Norton. And obviously, as of today, we can also say Oscar nominee Edward Norton, which I think I told you he will get an Oscar nomination for.
You did.
And yeah, I actually think he could win. However, there is now one other nominee for that award, and we're going to talk about that later in this show because he's in a film that's out today as well. And I think that might be some competition, if I'm honest. Other than that, though, it's a great cast all round. In particular, I really like Boyd Holbrook as Johnny Cash. Scoot McNairy, I think, really delivers as the late Woody Guthrie as well. And I just think it's a really interesting sort of look at this time period. It was the attention to period detail, the 1960s New York streets, and it's quite captivating, and you get taken along for this. As I say, not really a plot-driven ride, but very much a vibes one that I think has been very well captured by James Mangold.
Well, you can go and watch A Complete Unknown whenever you like, because it's already out in cinemas. All right, let's move from that to, I believe, a horror, Wolfman.
I mean, if it was a romantic comedy, it would be a strange title, wouldn't it?
Well, you never know these days.
You never know anymore, I know, right? New one from writer-director Leigh Whannell, who his previous film was the 2020 reimagining of The Invisible Man, which starred Elizabeth Moss and, oh God, who was the guy from Hollyoaks? I only know because Daryl Morris told me, I know him, he's from Hollyoaks. I'm like, okay, I'm glad one of us does. So I discovered that Daryl Morris is a big Hollyoaks fan. Who knew? Anyway, I worked with him recently, by the way. He says hello.
Hi.
So, yeah, we did Golden Globes. We do Golden Globes every year. Golden Globes and Oscars, he and I. Anyway, so following on from Invisible Man, Leigh Whannell has reimagined another classic Universal, classic monster label, this time The Wolfman, simply shortened to Wolfman, no definitive. It stars Christopher Abbott and Julia Garner. They are a married couple who, with their young daughter, trek out to the husband's late father, his deceased father's now abandoned farmhouse to essentially pack it up and move it on. They are attacked by a seemingly wild animal in the woods on the journey there. an animal that then chases them into said house that doesn't have power, doesn't have a phone, doesn't have food supplies, anything like that. It literally has a CB radio, and that is it. And as they attempt to survive the night with this creature trying everything to claw and scratch and break its way in, Daddy starts to fall a little ill. And, well, the title of the movie will probably tell you what his condition is. So I've got a clip for you. This is from the trailer for 2025's Wolfman.
Hello? Can anyone hear me? Hello? We were in an accident.
Daddy, are we gonna die?
No, it's my job to protect you.
And we were attacked. I think my husband was infected. Mike. Mike. Mike.
Daddy. Daddy. What's wrong with Daddy?
He got sick.
The thing I always find with these movies, which puts me off of them, is when they're so predictable, when they're that typical horror movie where you're watching it going, yeah, she's going to go downstairs, it's dark, she's going to answer the door, and you're thinking, I would never do that if it was real life.
No, actually, this is very clever about that.
Good.
Now, the way that this works is everything you predict, it does the exact second option. So just to give you an example off the top of your cuff, like there's one point when they're trying to fix a car to escape and they've got the engine cover up, and the way that the shot is positioned, just the way it's framed, you think, okay, the second they pull the engine cover down, it's going to be on the other side of it. No, it's not that. It's the second thing that you'd predict. And that's kind of it's also worth noting that its one big twist, its big reveal, is quite predictable from the off. Like, that's the only that you'll predict that, but that is a plot mechanic rather than in the actual scene. This starts off with sending shivers up your spine, and the intensity just ratchets up from there. It is an hour and 43 minutes long. Its opening scene takes about 10 or 15 minutes and has about all the resonance of that moment in M. Night Shyamalan's Signs, where you see the alien walk across the alleyway. It's like that. And then from there, it just ramps up into this absolute run and gun survive the night chiller. That it has scares galore. It's got
Purge vibes in it to me.
Oh no, nothing quite like that. No, I mean, I suppose if you talk about the first Purge when they're confined to the house, maybe. Yeah, first Purge. So you say Purge, and I think it's like everyone on the streets trying to kill each other, which is how I like my Purge movies, FYI.
Of course.
Yeah, I think we all agree the first Purge was a waste of time, and even they agreed when they made the sequel. Performances are very good. Like, even Julia Garner leans into, like, her own brand, effectively. Julia Garner is not a very accessible or likable personality, and they have lent into that with this character. Christopher Abbott is very, very well positioned in this. He plays, I don't want to give too much away about the character because it is a lot about generational trauma and toxic masculinity and child abuse. And I don't want to reveal too much on there, but the way that fits into, the way that subtext is used within the story of the Wolfman, I thought was very well done. And the only thing that I can compare it to on this level of effectiveness is the way in which The Invisible Man was, an abusive relationship stalker drama. And I think that was absolutely superb. It's very slick. It's very stylish. It is terrifying at times. And no joke, best werewolf transformation effects I've seen since An American Werewolf in London, which is not a comparison I toss out lightly.
Well, there you go. And you can see that transformation yourself because Wolfman is already out in cinemas. Right, still to come, The Brutalist, Flight Risk, Presence, and we're going to look at Star Trek Section 31 in just a minute. Stay where you are. So, hello and welcome back to Offscreen. Let's move swiftly on with our next movie then. Star Trek Section 31. Van, it's over to you.
Yeah, this one has been a long time coming. We were all very excited. And believe me, we should have lowered our expectations. So, if you're unfamiliar with this, there is a character in Star Trek Discovery played by Michelle Yeoh. She was originally a Starfleet captain named Philippa Georgiou, and she was killed off in the very first episode of Star Trek Discovery. She then re-emerged about halfway through that first season of Discovery, playing the Mirror Universe version of the same character. And she's then brought back into the Prime Universe, where she is recruited by a covert intelligence agency, effectively Starfleet CIA, named Section 31, who basically protect the utopia of Star Trek by committing murders and blackmailing people and doing all of the shady things that, like, the real-world CIA would do, effectively. But they are a secret, no one's supposed to know they exist. And this is it. She is, mass murderer from an alternate universe who happens to look exactly like an esteemed captain from the Prime universe. In this movie, which takes place, give or take, about 30 years before The Next Generation. It would be about 30 years before Captain Picard, because there is one character in it who kind of specifically timestamps it. She is recruited by a new team of Section 31 agents to lead them on a mission to track down and recover a weapon of mass destruction capable of destroying entire galaxies that it transpires she herself created in her own universe. But how did it get there? How did it come to the Prime Universe? Who could possibly have known about it and brought it here? Such is the mystery our new team have to set out and resolve, as they also attempt to uncover who within their own unit might be the mole giving the game away. So, have a listen. This is on Paramount Plus now. It's a full-length movie starring Oscar winner Michelle Yeoh, Star Trek Section 31.
The only way this works is if I know exactly what I'm dealing with.
We're facing a threat unlike anything Starfleet's ever seen.
Billions of lives are at stake. Gather your people. We're going to need every one of them.
31 is a Black Ops division. Spy work.
It's just a place for people to bend the rules.
Starfleet is here to make sure no one commits murder.
Whatever you believed your mission was, it's worse than you thought.
How do we stop it?
We work together and don't get dead. I'll try my hardest.
Now, I can't really say a huge amount about this because, to me, Star Trek was always the series in the 80s that I would watch in the evenings with my dad after he'd had his dinner. And that's where I left it. I've never watched...
Kirk or Picard, out of interest?
Kirk, yeah. So that's where I left it. I've not watched any of the Star Trek movies.
I can tell you, if you watch this, first of all, you would enjoy it more than me. Like, not knowing about Star Trek would actually enable you to enjoy this more than me. That being said, you wouldn't recognize it. It bears absolutely no resemblance to any Star Trek that's ever existed. Like, ever. It has so fundamentally abandoned the core tenets of the Star Trek universe. And just for any actual Star Trek fans listening, I am not talking about that ridiculous, it's not Roddenberry's vision nonsense at all. I'm not a believer in that. I'm someone that really loves Deep Space Nine, so I'm not beholden to the idea of Roddenberry puritanism, which is this ridiculous idea that human beings don't have conflict. We should be out to explore the galaxy in the human condition. Like, oh, sod off. No one cares. We want fun on the Starship Enterprise. That's all we want.
Yes.
Yeah, we want fun on the Starship Enterprise. If there's a human journey to be done there, cool, but we actually, want mission of the week kind of thing. This is attempting to be Mission Impossible Star Trek Edition. The problem is, it's an absolute mess. Even divorced from the Star Trek of it all, even if you remove all the fandom and all the continuity, which, again, as I said, one of the characters in this is a part of that continuity. So they're very deliberately trying to entangle it in. You're actually making this messier. But that's the continuity side. Even if you remove all that, you've still got something that feels like it was cobbled together from a streaming series into a condensed, like a 6-episode series that has been compressed into a 100-minute long film, to the extent that there are literal chapter markers where they actually bring up chapter titles, whilst video game-like exposition is delivered to the camera. Your next mission is you must go here. And we see this as a Starfleet information display, as if we're playing a PS2 game. And it's an absolute mess. The characters are very badly written. The dialogue is poor. The plot makes next to no sense. Characters simply go from one location to another for absolutely no reason other than they need to. If you're actually going with any kind of foreknowledge of who the Michelle Yeoh character is, it's going to work even less for you because it directly contradicts all of that by simply trying to make this mass murderer too likable, which, you know, historically they had always done pretty well with, like on Discovery with this character. They made no bones about the fact that she would literally snap your neck if she disliked you. Here, they're kind of trying to make her nice. You know, no, don't do that. Like, okay, the Fast and Furious can maybe get away with that with Jason Statham, but you're not pulling that off in Star Trek. They're very, very different franchises. And it also, this is my I mean, it's badly directed. The fight scenes are filmed like in close-ups. There's way too much digital zooming. There's way too much, hilariously enough for this series, lens flare, because famously J.J. Abrams got raked over the coals for that. And not to put too fine a point in it, but this finally, after 59 years of Star Trek, gives this franchise its own Jar Jar Binks. They have somehow created the single worst character with the single most irritating performance in the entire history of Star Trek, which I believe now encompasses 12, is it either 9 or 12 actual series, and this would now be the 14th film. Yeah, it's taken that long to create a character as truly awful as the one here whose name is Fuzz. And believe me, you'll just know the minute you see him, like, oh, God, you're going to be insufferable, aren't you? And yes, he is.
What we need is Emmanuelle in Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, we need Emmanuelle in Space / Deep Space Nine. That would work. Now that's a Star Trek franchise. But yeah, honestly, avoid this like the plague. I guarantee you, this is going to replace Star Trek V: The Final Frontier in every fan's ranking as the worst Star Trek movie. And let's be honest, if it's not Final Frontier, it's Nemesis. This is going to top both of those as every fan's most hated Star Trek movie. And if you try and introduce Star Trek to someone using this movie, you will never get them to watch anything Trek ever again. It is bad.
Well, Star Trek Section 31 is out in cinemas from today.
No, Paramount Plus.
Sorry. Paramount Plus.
It's a streaming movie.
Yeah, I mean, it always confuses me. That always makes me feel like they know it's not that great.
Yeah, more or less, to be fair. Go with that, yeah.
All right, so let's move on then to something that made me chuckle. It's called Presence. It's a horror movie, but it's one of those things that really grinds my gears, is when a synopsis could be for any horror movie. A family becomes convinced they are not alone after moving into a new home in the suburbs. Like, that could be any horror movie.
Right, I'm going to make your day even worse now and tell you that literally is the entirety of the plot.
Oh, no. God.
So this has been directed by Steven Soderbergh. Okay, so Steven Soderbergh, you know, who made Ocean's 11, that trilogy, who made Sex, Lies, and Videotape, made Out of Sight. Steven freaking Soderbergh, you know, indie film god, Steven Soderbergh. And effectively what he's done here is made his version of Paranormal Activity. Family move into a house, weird stuff starts happening. They think there's something in the house. Guess what? There is. Here's a clip. This is them having dinner.
Felt or sensed anything unusual here? Do you mean like
a presence?
No. Have you?
Yes.
Can you elaborate?
I'm not sure I want to.
Okay, maybe you and me can talk later.
At first I just sensed it, and then things moved.
Moved?
Yes.
What things?
A lot of things. I saw it.
You saw it? You saw things move?
I saw the aftermath.
So she sees it, he doesn't, something happens, she goes and investigates, he then follows, he then goes, oh, you're telling the truth, it's right, something's weird, and boom, they all die.
You're sure you haven't seen this?
I mean, that's how they go.
Right. So, the absolute star of this movie is its cinematography, which is effectively a floating camera. The camera moves as if it's from the POV of the possessing entity of the house, as if it is like we're seeing like what the ghost sees, kind of thing. It stars as the parents of the family, Lucy Liu. Remember Lucy Liu? She turned up in that awful Christmas movie with Dwayne Johnson recently, and Chris Sullivan. Chris Sullivan, who I didn't recognize until my friend John Dickinson, writes a lot about horror films, till he pointed out to me, oh, that's Taserface from Guardians of the Galaxy 2. I'm like, is it? And it makes a lot of sense now. I'm like, okay, I was wondering why throughout the whole movie he felt weirdly familiar to me. It's not very good. I mean, it's basically what happens if Paranormal Activity goes to uni and has a lot of Freshers' Week sex, only nowhere near as fun as that actually sounds, or would in fact be. It is a very forgettable film that, like I say, if you've ever seen a Paranormal Activity film, I thought you've seen this before. It's 85 minutes. It somehow feels overlong at that. There's nothing remarkable about it, save for maybe just how it's shot and the fact that it's got Steven Soderbergh's name on it. Other than that, it's incredibly forgettable. It's a non-event. And believe me, nobody's going to remember that this exists next week, let alone like by the end of the year.
Well, if you want to waste your money and go and see it, you can, because the movie Presence is out in cinemas from today. All right, we've got two left.
You didn't want to say the Presence is in cinemas. Weirdly, when we went to the screening, it actually was on the screen in front of us. This cinema has and then it was the logo for Presence. That's clever. I like that. That's clever. Yeah.
Well, at least you like something out of it.
Well, it's cleverer than the film itself. That little marketing trick was cleverer than the film. Sorry.
But it is in cinemas from now. Right, 2 left to go. We're going to look at The Brutalist, and next we'll see what Flight Risk is all about. We'll be back in a sec. Hello and welcome back to Offscreen then for one last ride with 2 movies. We're going to talk about The Brutalist in a moment, but let's move swiftly on to Flight Risk. So, is this about an aeroplane that crashes?
I mean, it's about an aeroplane. I'll give you that. Right, first and foremost, this is the new movie from the Oscar-winning director, Mel Gibson. Remember him?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Right. I mean, funnily enough, it's 30 years this year since Braveheart, which won him that Best Director Oscar. Funnily enough, so Braveheart is 30 this year. Where did that go? That and Batman Forever are going to be 30. My God. Jeez. Anyway, so he has directed this new one. It stars Mark Wahlberg, Michelle Dockeray from Downton Abbey, and Topher Grace from That 70s Show. Remember? Is he Eric in That 70s Show? The main kid.
Oh, yes.
So, the basic premise here is Michelle Dockeray is a US Marshal who tracks down a fugitive, mafia accountant in Alaska, played by Topher Grace, and forces him, in exchange for immunity, to testify against his former boss, a mobster. I think his name is Moretti or something. A mobster who's going on trial in New York, the following day. So, just doing this in exchange for, protection and immunity. And in order to get him there, they have a private charter plane they hire, flown by Mark Wahlberg, that's going to take them from Alaska. Is it from Alaska to Anchorage? It's from wherever they are to Anchorage in Alaska, which is basically like a 90-minute flight. So the movie is more or less real time. The movie takes place in more or less the time period it's supposed to be. And no sooner have they taken off than Topher Grace, who's chained up in the back, behind the US Marshal and Mark Wahlberg, notices that the pilot's ID is sticking out from under his seat, pulls it out with his foot, and notices that the photo on this pilot's license does not match the man in front of them. So, I'll let the clip explain the rest.
Don't shoot him, we need him!
Mayday, mayday. We've been compromised. The pilot's a hitman.
I'm gonna tear you apart. The tiny little pieces, they're gonna need the entire forensics team to identify you.
Tell me how to fly this thing, or we will die out here.
Clearly, you've mistaken me for somebody who actually gives me.
You hear that? Looks military.
You think it's there to help? It's there to shoot you down.
See, I quite like the sound of this now, and I've been watching the trailer on mute while you've been talking, and actually it seems like Mark Wahlberg plays quite a, how can I say, quite a funny guy in this as well. There's some quite funny moments.
Yeah, he's very much a scenery-chewing, menacing villain. And it's actually something very new for Wahlberg. Like, give him his dues. He is actually pushing outside his comfort zone here. I mean, he has got the worst, like, fake bald job you've ever seen, because they've, like, shaved him so it looks like he's balding and weird, and it's kind of funny. But I'd say he is quite like a salivating, snarling villain. You can hear the dialogue in that. They're going to chop you in a tiny bit and whole forensics thing. And it's good fun. I mean, it's idiotic. I mean, it is lantern-jawed to the nth degree, and you can predict where most of it goes. But
he looks like Jack Nicholson in The Shining. That's who he reminds me of in this.
Kind of like the comedic answer to. Yeah. But you know what? It fills a very particular void that we have this year, because in the US, they had Den of Thieves 2 Pantera released, I think it was last week, with Jared Butler. And as my friend Andy Meakin runs the Light Cinema in Sheffield, famously said, every January needs a palate-cleansing trash actioner. And you know what? Ever since he said that to me, which was about 15 years ago now, every January we get one, and I do think of him telling me, he is absolutely right. 2 years ago we had Jared Butler in Plane. Last year we had Jason Statham in The Beekeeper. This year we should have had Jerry Butler in Den of Thieves 2, admittedly, but we get this instead. And all right, it's not anywhere near as good as Plane or Beekeeper, certainly not as good as The Beekeeper, goddamn. But you know what? It is what it says on the tin. It's a palate-cleansing trash actioner for January. Traditionally the dumping ground of cinema. January and August, like the worst months of the year to go to the cinema. Yeah, I think it's January and August. But as a tight and tidy, like 90-minuter, you know, it's fine. It's concept thrill. It's confined to a plane, so it's a small location, 3 cast members, decent enough fun. Okay, it's stupid as hell, but it's at least a good time doing it. And I can't quite reconcile how the man that made this has an Oscar for directing to his name, but, you know, as is not to judge. He's Mel Gibson. Well, let's be honest, his biggest achievement to date is that he somehow managed to be the most racist Australian, which is a real achievement.
Well, Flight Risk is already... Well, no, it's out in cinemas from today, isn't it? 24th of January.
That one's out today, yeah.
So, you can go and check it out yourself. I actually wouldn't mind watching that. I think I will.
I think you'd enjoy. You would enjoy, yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like my kind of movie. All right, let's end then with The Brutalist.
You wouldn't enjoy.
Why, is it dubbed?
No. Okay, first of all, it's nearly 4 hours long.
What?
Right? It clocks in at 3 hours and 50 minutes in total. So a 3 hour, 25-minute film that has a baked-in 25-minute intermission that takes it to 3 hours and 50 minutes. So at a point, the film basically fades to black. A card comes up with a countdown timer and basically says, you know, end of part 1, come back for part 2. It is largely in black and white. It features a lot of Hungarian with English subtitles. It stars Adrian Brody, Guy Pearce, Alessandro Nivola, Felicity Jones, Joe Alwyn, I think, who's most famous at the moment for being Taylor Swift's ex. That poor man. And it is the story of a Hungarian Holocaust survivor, a fictional architect named Laszlo Toth, who comes to America, having fled Europe after the Holocaust and his liberation, flees to, you know, we get the bit where he lands at Ellis Island and sees the Statue of Liberty and goes to the immigration thing. And although he ekes out a living, you know, at first, you know, working for his cousin's furniture business and develops like a functional heroin habit, he finds himself taken in by a pretty snotty high society, you know, rich, I don't know how to describe, but a sort of a Rockefeller type, who's played by Guy Pearce, who after he's remodeled his study with his own unique signature style, is discovered to actually be an absolutely game-changing architect in his homeland. Like, prior to the Holocaust, he was like a visionary architect, one of the forerunners of brutalist architecture. If you've ever seen the Barbican in London, that would be one of our most famous examples of you know, traditionally brutalist architecture. In fact, they had the premiere for this at the Barbican for that reason. No sooner has he entered the employ of Guy Pearce, however, he is asked to design effectively a community centre for him, a sort of Randian, a sort of a fountainhead-like Ayn Randian task that consumes his life and sees him trying to put all of his soul and his creativity on display for the world to see. However, as with all creative visions, and also, sort of Randian, protagonists, this, of course, leads to ire from the outside. And that's only the first half of the movie. I'm not even getting to the second. So have a listen. This is Guy Pearce basically approaching Laszlo for the first time with this community project.
These are yours, yes?
Yes.
All of them?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Have I upset you?
No. Not at all. Did not realize these images were still available, much less of any consequence. May I keep these?
Of course you may. They're very artistic.
I like the premise of this movie, but the thought of subtitles, a 25-minute break in the middle, I mean, by that point, my mouth's already like, sawdust, wanting more drinks that I can't afford. And I just don't know. I think I'd get bored for 3 hours.
Actually, no, at no point was I bored. I took Faith along with me to this. We went to the premiere, would you believe?
But that's why you weren't bored.
No, hang on. So we went to the premiere, and the entire cast and Brady Corbet, who's director, this is only his third film, I think, showed up, introed it. We watched it in 70mm, VistaVision at Picture House Central. And as well as being the premiere, it was doubling as a BAFTA screening, so it was for BAFTA voters. This, funnily enough, was the day the BAFTA nominations were announced. And when it got to that intermission, you would not believe how many members of BAFTA just sodded off. They just got up and left. They did not come back. And I know this because they gave us all cans of pre-mixed spicy margaritas. And he didn't open his. He left all of... The guy sat next to me didn't open any of his. He just left them all in his seat. I'm like, hey! Yeah, my incredible gain. So, thanks, man. Whoever you are, thank you. You're a terrible person for leaving a movie halfway through, but cheers to the spicy margs. Right, Adrian Brody will win the Oscar for this. I will stake my reputation on that. I genuinely think he will. Guy Pearce has been nominated for Best Supporting for this, opposite Edward Norton for A Complete Unknown. Incidentally, the only film that can rival this for being the mumbliest film of the year so far, because you heard Adrian Brody in that clip. He and Timothée Chalamet are facing off a Best Actor to see who can mumble the best this year. I think it is captivating. It is capital C cinema. It is a lot like this is the thing, it's not entertaining in the same way that Citizen Kane is not an entertaining film. Like, if anyone ever asked me what the best film I've ever seen is, my answer is always, well, I mean, on an academic level, I really have to say Citizen Kane, but is it my favourite film? Hell no. Would I ever watch it again? Probably not. Though, what is my favourite film? Very different answer to what is the best film I've ever seen. This could rival it. This is a genuinely fantastic film. However, it has no crossover mainstream appeal. And they do seem to know that because it is not being widely shown, despite the fact this is one of the forerunners for this year's Academy Awards. Superbly directed, epic score. The cinematography is insane. The level of vision that you are immersed in, and believe me, the word is immersed, is really something to behold. But I know that the black and white nature of it, the subtitled nature of it, the length of it, I know all of this is going to put people off, and I completely understand, because it really is a Herculean task to sit through for a lot of people. I understand that, but certainly if you're a film fan, if you're a cinephile, definitely go and see this. And if you can, go and see it on 70mm film, because that's how we saw it, and it was a genuine experience. I have nothing but good things to say about it, save for maybe the second half isn't quite as punchy as the first, but that's pretty fair of a movie so long that both of its halves basically make up entire films in their own right. You know what I mean?
Well, it must be good, because if I ever heard you utter the words, this film is 4 hours long, normally it's followed by, don't see it, it's a load of rubbish.
Usually, if we're honest, right?
Yeah. So it's got to be pretty decent for you.
Hey, we don't know how long Avatar 3 is going to be in December yet, so, you know.
Probably the same length as Wicked Part 2.
Yeah.
Well, The Brutalist is in cinemas from today. If you can find one that's showing it, maybe Van has sold it to you. Go and see it. Right, very quickly then, because we're running out of time. Movie of the week. I have no idea where you're going with this one.
Oh, I mean, movie of the week. I am. Do you know what? I'm going to go with Wolfman. It's the one out of all of them, out of everything that we've talked about this week. It's the one I want to watch again. It's the one I want to see again, and I actually want to see it late night in a cinema, public screening. I want a packed house. I want a full audience. I want people screaming and chucking a popcorn in the air like they were at the premiere we went to. I want that again. Like, that was great, and I would love to experience that again.
And movies we are going to look at next week. So I don't know anything about any of these, actually, I don't think. So Companion?
Companion is a new sort of horror comedy about Jack Quaid from The Boys, right? Gets himself effectively a sex bot, played by Sophie Thatcher from Yellow Jackets and Heretic. And he does the dumbest thing imaginable and jailbreaks it. He hacks it. And of course, it then gets murderous. We've also got the new Mike Leigh movie Hard Truths, Elevation, with Anthony Mackie and Morena Baccarin, and that's out next week. That's the one I told you about. That's from the producers of A Quiet Place, and he's basically it's kind of like A Quiet Place, except the aliens can't get above 8,000 feet, so all the human beings have to live on like mountains. And
love this.
And Daddy needs medicine for his kids, so he's got to go below 8,000 feet. Like, oh, hell yeah, pour that in me. That sounds awesome. We've got The Tasting out as well, which is a new foreign language film I don't know an awful lot about, if I'm really honest. And one that I've really been looking forward to, a new film from Jason Reitman, Saturday Night, which I know has had some preview screenings, some public preview screenings around this last week. It is a real-time dramedy about the 90 minutes before the airing and recording of the very first episode of Saturday Night Live in 1975, with like actors playing like Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd and people like that. I can't wait for this. This is right, kind of big an SNL guy anyway. This is right up my alley.
Yes, there's some bangers to look forward to next week then. Well, that is, of course, all we have time for this time round. We will return next week. Until then, I've been Adam Ball.
I've been Van Connor, and we shall be back.